Hey, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about comparing yourself to others, something that is so common in not only athletes, but us in general in our day-to-day lives. We live in a world where comparison is so easy to go by, and we can get caught up in focusing on someone else and what they're doing and then really forget about what we're doing. So I'm going to go through a few things that you may find come up that are pretty common, and then a few tips in which you can use to overcome these feelings. So let's get straight into this episode. First off, I think that this topic is so common. In a previous episode I'd done with Caroline Burkle, in the last episode I'd done with Caroline Burkle, we actually spoke about it right at the end of the episode. It's something that was super common in athletes that she was seeing, that she was mentoring. And I totally agree. I think this is something that is not only a pandemic in itself among athletes, but it's just within us as society. And that is down to the fact that the world we live in is just bombarding us with other people's messages, other people's highlights, and it leaves us feeling this sense of inadequacy, that low self-worth, and a lack of motivation, because we see what they're doing and we see the highlights and the successes, and then we reflect on where we are in our own journey, and we are maybe not at that point, or we feel this moment of jealousy and inadequacy in what we're doing, and it just really is painful. And it's very easy to do that as an athlete. You can look at what other people are doing in their performances, maybe what other coaches are saying about them, and you can see that as them not saying that about you, and you're losing track of what's going on in your own world, and you see all the praise, all the accolades going to someone else, and you're not getting that. Then those comparisons creep in, you spend time dwelling on it, you lose that confidence, you lose that self-esteem, that self-worth feeling, and you really start to go into this downward spiral. I've been there, I've had that. And do you know what? Another thing is I see parents doing it as well. I saw recently, and I've had an experience recently, where a parent was comparing their own child to someone else's child and what that child, the other child was going through. And then they were kind of losing sight in what their own child was doing in the first place. So you don't even just see it directly with your own experience. You see it with the parents or anyone around you. Sometimes can be those that are caring for you, they can have those comparisons as well. So I think even if you're a parent, it's really worthwhile noting as well whether you're doing this, whether you're comparing someone else to your own child. So I've even done this, a parent in sport episode previously, and if you want to go and check that one out, I'll leave the link in the bio for the parents in sport episode, so that you can feed in a little bit more information and my thoughts on that subject. But for comparing yourself to others, again, something that is super common, and the reason it happens is because we start to look externally for our validation. We look at all of the things outside that are going to give us this idea of success and self-worth, that are external rather than internal markers. And it's really important to recognize that even if you are trying to measure this success, it will never end. It will constantly be there. Even when you've reached that level of success that you're kind of underpinning as the marker that is where you were trying to get to, once you get there, it will still be, there'll be another marker that you'll need to make, and then there'll be something else that you're comparing yourself to. So unless you start to look at the internal world that you're living in, and where you can validate yourself internally, then it will constantly be a stream of external validation that you're looking for. And it's so much more worthwhile to be looking within and looking internally. And the problems we get with this comparison to others is that we believe there is some sort of metric, there's some sort of value, and this scoring system, this competition that we're living in. And all of this that we dwell on, and all of these thoughts that we dwell on when we're talking about comparing ourselves to others, it steals all our time away from ourselves and what we're trying to work on. So again, if you're in a team and you're working on yourself, you're improving yourself, but then you get caught up in comparing yourself to someone else and what they're doing, all of that time you'll spend dwelling and focusing on them is time not spent on honing your own craft, honing what you're doing, and getting better and becoming a better person, a better player, a better athlete, everything. Just all of your time is being shifted over. and you're unable to control what they're doing. You're unable to control what someone else is doing. You can only control what you're doing. And it's where you need to put your time. It's where you need to be focusing on. Don't lose sight of the progress that you've made. Look back at where you've come from, the year that you've had, the weeks that you've had, the months that you had, whatever timeline it may be. Look at where you were, say, a year ago, a month ago, a week ago. And I guarantee there'll be something that you've learned, you've done, that has made you a little bit better, whether it's in what you're doing, what you're thinking, and habits that you've had, and constantly looking to improve yourself. It could just simply be your fitness, your health, your well-being, but it could also be your skill, your craft. There's something that you would have done, time you would have put in that's made you that little bit better. So it's always worth reflecting back on what you've done and where you are now to see that progress that you've made, rather than comparing it to where someone else is in their progress. Because there is a different timeline. There's a different timeline to what they're going along. You don't know the amount of hours they've put in compared to the amount that you are in. And you could both be on a very similar path, but you could be both different parts, different times of that path. It doesn't make it any less valuable. It doesn't make it any less successful. But ultimately, you could just be at different time frames. And I find myself doing this with whether it was full-blown professional athletes when I was growing up, and I would look at what they're doing and I would go, oh, well, I don't have the skill that they have. But I was looking at someone who had potentially spent 10, 15, 20 years honing their craft, and I'd been doing it for 5 minutes. It's not realistic. You need to have that time and the experiences, the failures, the successes, the doubts, the hard work. You need all that. You need all that experience in order to start to figure out where you are on your journey. But if you spend that time, you spend those moments, the present moment, thinking about someone else, you're wasting your time. You're taking all of that valuable time away from what you're doing and putting it into someone else, and something you ultimately cannot control. When you do all this, when you do all of this comparison and dwelling on someone else's successes and comparing your own journey to someone else's, you have so much to lose and very little to gain by doing it. By stripping away that thought of what they're doing and focusing on you, you're gaining. You're just constantly putting into yourself, and you're constantly putting into what you're doing and those around you that you're trying to impact, and focusing on your purpose, your why. It is so much more to lose than to gain by doing this. I can't iterate that enough. So spending that time and just being mindful of it, being mindful of that time you're spending thinking about others, and catch yourself doing it. And I'll move on to some tips that we can use and we can kind of catch ourselves doing and flick towards in order to build our self-confidence up and focus more on ourselves. But yeah, if there's anything out of this, it's just really the time that you're going to be losing from spending that time focusing on someone else and something you can't control. And in order to get that motivation back, look at where you've come from, look at what you've done, and you'll recognize that you have made progress, I promise. So some things to recognize and to remember is that your journey, again, is completely different. It's your own journey, and it's a unique journey. Nobody in the world is perfect. So if you're looking at someone, again, social media does this to us. If you're looking at what others are doing on social media, recognize that lifestyle, again, is not perfect. The way they've done it is not perfect. And the brilliant thing about your own journey is that it's full of its imperfections and it's full of its unique experiences, but that's the story that you get to tell in the end, and that's something that could potentially inspire someone else. And I look back at all the unique things that I did, the unique journeys I had, and that's the stuff that I use to motivate myself and recognize that by doing it differently, doing it in this weird and wonderful way, or things that you think are not perfect, that in itself is the good bit. That in itself is the really great part of your story that you get to tell, that is so unique and makes you you. And again, I think as another note on when you go into this frame of mind of comparing yourself, it really does deprive you of all that joy that is out there, of all the positive things that are going on, and you end up dwelling in this negative space. So, and it's totally natural. It is remember that it is totally natural to do this, but it is just so worthwhile catching yourself to get yourself out of that negative space and recognize that there's so much more joy to be had in these metrics, these values, this idea of success, and really looking internally, and that's where you'll find the happiness of how well you've done and making yourself proud in what you've done. So a few tips in how to actually combat this. One I reckon that is a really strong one is practicing gratitude. And I'd mentioned this before in my podcast around negative visualization. Again, I'll leave links in the show notes for that episode. And I spoke about in that how if you want to figure out what you're grateful for, then think of something that if you didn't have it, how much it would suck. So it could be your health, it could be people, it could be an object, it could be whatever. So if it was your health, for example, I use the example of you've got two perfectly functioning knees, and imagine not having them, like how much it would suck not being able to move around as well. And that's something to be grateful for. So your health, your physicality, your well-being, your physical well-being, that could be one. It could be a person, it could be an object, whatever it is. Another thing is recognizing that when comparing yourself to someone else, are you looking at them in comparison or are you looking at them as inspiration? Because inspiration is okay. If you can look at someone, and I regularly do this, and I look at what other people are doing, and rather than comparing where I'm at, I always recognize that I'm in a different level of journey, but I use what they're doing as inspiration and maybe things that I can pick apart and use in my own life. I think that's really, really valuable. I think to look at what others are doing and use it as inspiration. I always did this growing up and saw what others were doing and tried to think of how I could bring it into my own life, how I could bring it into what I was doing. And I really advocate that for young people especially, is to just look at what others are doing and the habits, the training, the daily routines, the diet, the exercise, whatever it is they're doing. Look at it, maybe try it out, see if it works in your life, and it might bring you some sort of success and it might move the needle a little bit more for you. So using others as inspiration, but knowing when you flicked over into comparison and you've gone into that sort of negative mindset and that negative frame of mind. And that just takes a little bit of awareness, a little bit of mindful thinking around whether you are in that inspiration mode or comparison mode. But yeah, inspiration can be a great thing when looking at others. Celebrate your own successes as well. So the little markers that you get along the way, any goals that you set, it's always worthwhile setting those short, medium, long-term goals. And when you hit one, celebrate it. Like, let someone know about it. It could be a family friend, it could be a partner, it could be a parent, whatever it is, but just let them know that you've hit that marker and then celebrate it and then reset that goal again and off you go. But just take that time to really celebrate your successes. I want to finish with the last one, which is comparing yourself to you. And the best quote that I got from this, and one that I love, is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. I think that's Jordan Peterson who said that. And that is, again, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. It's such a great line. And what I've already touched on already, which is the fact that by comparing yourself to you, you see that progress that you've made. You see, have I got better? Have I moved in the right direction? And you may have, or you may not have. And kind of, again, reflecting back to nobody is perfect, just recognizing that, okay, if I haven't got better today, or don't feel I have, then I get another chance tomorrow. But it is worthless and not worth your time to be comparing yourself to how someone else is doing today, because you're forgetting where you've come from. You're forgetting what progress you've made, where you have become better. And again, you're looking at someone else's journey, and it could be a completely different time frame, part of their journey, their time on their path that they've had, and you don't know the experiences that they've had, and it's just not worth your time. So measure yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. I think that's so valuable, and that's where I'm going to leave it, because this is again a big topic, and I just wanted to give a few insights and ideas and some tips that you could perhaps use if you're feeling like this and you feel like you often get caught up comparing yourself to someone else. And anything that I've just said here, you could just take it and use it as a mantra. I use it really often, just having a little phrase that you've maybe repeated over and over again, so that when you do catch yourself saying something, or internally or externally, where you're comparing yourself to someone else, or you might be flicking through social media and you feel that emotion, then just having that mantra in the back of your head, some phrase that you've used, it could be what I've just said, and you use it to catch yourself and get in the way and shield yourself from these negative emotions and this feeling of comparison. But thanks again for listening to another episode of the podcast. If you want to reach out, you can find me on Instagram at Lewis Hatchett, or you can head over to lewishatchett.com/podcast, where all the episodes are on my website. If you haven't done already, you can download the Sport Yogi app on iOS and Android. You can also head over to sportyogi.com where you can find out more and download it. I'll leave all the links in the show notes. We nearly hit 1,000 athletes that have downloaded the app that are using it. So if you haven't done already, whether it's you, your team, your coaches, let them know and feel free to join this community, join the team. I'm so looking forward to building it and seeing more and more of you join this team that we're building. Just one more thing before you go. If you're enjoying this podcast or you want to hear more topics, then please feel free to leave us a review. It really does help out the show. So you can head over to Apple Podcasts, scroll all the way down to the bottom, write your review and click submit. So yeah, let me know what you want to be hearing more of. If there's a topic that you have found that's come up or you have any questions, I can make episodes in the future. But any ratings, any reviews really does help the longevity of this podcast. And I thank all of you who have done it so far and all of you that have joined this community. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys next week.